I'm a professional guitarist, but I play a lot of keyboards for my YouTube channel, on my own music. I've even been hired to play keyboards on other people's stuff, even though I'm not actually very good at playing keyboards. But in this video, I'm going to show you 5 ways you can sound good even if you're not good. Pro tip number 1 is use any means necessary. I'm going to say it again. We're going to use any means necessary. And what I mean is, in the world of synthesizers, there's lots of ways you can program them to play themselves and lots of sort of shortcuts you can take so that you don't really have to play it. It's okay to do that. I just think the move is that you got to exaggerate the shortcut and lean into the artificial method. If you do it and try to make it sound realistic, I think that's cross purposes. But if you program a keyboard to make something easy for you and then you try to lean on that as much as possible, there can be a vibe. So for the example you're about to hear, I'm using the Replay Synth from Vongon. This just got a new firmware update, and to celebrate, they released a new color. See how this one is black? Used to be white. You can get them in black now if you want. The new firmware update lets you do this thing where you can play any chord and then store that chord to one key. And then when you play any key, just with one finger, it'll now trigger that entire chord from whatever new key you're pushing. Now, you don't have to use a major chord to do this. You can use any chords you want. I just used a major chord for the song you're about to hear. But you might be thinking, well, what if I want to use more than one type of chord? Like, what if I don't want to play a song that is only major chords? Well, actually, you can use major chords like this to sound like any other type of chord. Even if you have a keyboard where all you can do is play major chords with one finger at a time, you can make those major chords sound like any change. You just have to be crafty with your bass lines and the rest of your arrangement. I have a whole separate video where I explain how to do this. It's called Major Triads, How to Be Advanced. You got to use the power of music theory to do it, but I explain everything you need to know in that other video. You can use major chords to sound like anything you want. The other thing is that even if you do it that way, you're still sort of sacrificing voice leading a little bit when you do this. Voice leading is if you play one chord to another, how elegantly does each note of the first chord move to the second note of the second chord. So if you play G major to C major, for example, one way to do it on a keyboard is to use inversion so your hand doesn't have to move very much, like this. Another way to do it is like the brute force way, where you just move your whole hand in the same shape to the new root. The first way is like decent voice leading. The second way is no voice leading at all. And when you use a keyboard to move a chord shape around for you, where you're just using one finger the whole time, you're basically stuck using the worst possible voice leading on every change. But that can be a vibe. There can be something kind of trashy and fun about that. So for the example you're about to hear, I'm using only major chords and I'm playing them with one finger, but I picked a sound that I thought would work. And I also set up the Vongon Replay so that it's always going a little bit in and out of tune, just to sort of set the mood. By the way, if you want to buy any of the gear in this video, I have affiliate links you can use that'll give me a small commission on anything you buy. I'll put the affiliate links in the video description. Money! Pro tip number 2 is sequencing. Many synthesizers have some kind of sequencer in them, which is just a thing that'll let you program it to play any sequence of notes, and then it'll execute it for you. So for the example you're about to hear, I'm using my OP1, and I painstakingly sequenced into this the bass part to an Earth, Wind, and Fire song. And you're going to see when I play it, it's actually not very interesting. I just push down one button to trigger the sequence, and then I hold it down. But there are a couple of things you can do that I think will make sequence parts sound even better. One is if your instrument has a swing parameter, like if you can tell it to put some swing on its 8th notes or 16th notes, you should do it. Even if it's a song that you think calls for no swing, just use a little bit. I have my OP1 permanently set to 54% swing. 50% swing is no swing at all in OP1 world. That's like perfectly straight. So I always have it a little bit swung. Sometimes I'll adjust it up or down as needed, but like non-zero swing can make a robotic sequenced part just a little more hip. Okay, and then the other thing I think it's good to do, this one is a little superstitious, but when you're recording a sequenced part, I think it can be good to run it through some actual analog hardware on the way to recording it. So like a real pedal or a real rack gear, something that's not software. I am not an analog purist. I love digital sounds. I love them with all my heart. I use them constantly. But when you're recording a sequenced part, I think it can be good to just hit it with some analog gear that'll break up a little bit, just to make it less virtual. It's like you want to grow some analog hair on the chest of your sequence parts. Like we're trying to put some chest hair on those. You know what I mean? Like you just want it to live in the world a little bit before it gets converted to more ones and zeros. So for the example you're about to hear, I'm using the Long Life from Fairfield Circuitry. This is like a filter EQ. I'm using the EQ part just to add a little resonant peak to the edge of the synth bass part. But I also love the way this breaks up. I have the gain on maximum almost all the time. And then I use the volume to turn it down as needed. But using the gain in this filter you're about to hear, it can just add some real world bullshit to the sequence part. For pro tip number 3, we're going to talk about arpeggiators. A lot of synthesizers will have an arpeggiator built into them, and if you turn that on, all it does is if you hold down a chord, it'll play all the notes of that chord individually in some kind of arpeggiated order. Of course, my favorite order is random. So for the example you're about to hear, I've got a random arpeggio going on the Vongon Replay synth again. But the trick for this, the pro tip here, is I like to set a random arpeggiator so that the onset of the notes is very slow and the decay of the notes is also very slow. So the notes are constantly randomly seeping into the picture and they sort of together form this like shifting chord cloud. Chord cloud is really good, as you're about to hear. The other thing I'm doing with the replay synth is that I'm using one of my favorite sounds where I have a lot of noise in the note, but the noise is getting filtered by the filter in the replay synth to be so resonant that the noise actually adds this kind of like xylophone pitch action to the note. This is like my favorite thing the replay synth can do. The reason I'm telling you this is that I'm going to give out all my Vongon Replay patches. You can download them if you join my Patreon. All my Patreon members and YouTube members, look for a new post where I just give away all my Vongon Replay synth sounds, including the ones in this video. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to give the presets cute names or whether it's just going to be preset 1, preset 2, preset 3. I haven't decided that yet. But either way, you can download them. In the meantime, here is a chord cloud in action. Pro tip number 4 is another look at random. I have a whole separate video where I talk about stuff you can do with randomness that I think is really cool, even though that video underperformed. But I have even new tricks since I made that video that I'm now going to share with you. If you get the firmware update, the new firmware update for the Vongon Replay synth, they added new random LFOs. So there's like new ways to harness random behavior if you get the firmware update. The 3 styles of random they have now are sample and hold, smooth sample and hold, and noise. And the differences, real quick, are that sample and hold is like vanilla random. Smooth sample and hold is like a less abrupt version of that. The jumps will be less steep. And then noise is like a more jittery, more clustered style of random. In the example you're about to hear, I was using noise, and I was using noise to control the pitch so that everything was always frantically going out of tune a little bit. That just created this lo-fi result that I loved. But I wasn't done with randomness. I also wrote a Max MSP patch that would use MIDI to randomly instantiate any chord progression I gave it. If you don't know what Max MSP is, it's just this sort of programming language you can use to do music stuff with, and it can send out MIDI. So I was using this program I wrote to control the Vongon Replay synth, which can take MIDI. And the program I wrote, just you give it a chord progression, and then it'll interpret it and come up with these random voicings to play it. I'll give the Max MSP patch away. If anybody watching this uses Max MSP, just join my Patreon or become a YouTube member for 1 month, and I'll give it away. What you're about to hear is a very noisy, random, lo-fi pitch sound I got on the Vongon Replay synth being played by the random MXP patch I wrote. Pro tip number 5 is, what do you do when you actually have to play? Like, you can't use arpeggiators or sequencers or MIDI. Like, you actually have to put your hands on the keyboard and play. What do you do if you're not very good? Well, my number 1 piece of advice is, if you can get a cool sound, then you don't have to play much. The better the sound, the less you have to do. If you can just get a tone that's like 1 in a million, all you got to do is like play a couple notes, hit the right chords in the right spots, just, be risk averse. It'll sound great. And to prove it, I'm going to tell you a story about this keyboard behind me, this thing. It's a Yamaha CP30. The reason I have it is that a long time ago, I was reading the Wikipedia article about You Make My Dreams, the Hall & Oates song. I'd never known what the beginning of that song was. When I was a kid, I sort of assumed it was a guitar, but anytime I tried to figure it out, I started to feel like it's not a guitar. Anyway, I read this Wikipedia article about it where Daryl Hall says he was using an obscure keyboard from the 70s called the Yamaha CP30. And the first thing I noticed was that Yamaha CP30 was not its own blue Wikipedia link. Like, there was no article about it. And I thought that was interesting. The only presence it had on Wikipedia was in some other Wikipedia article titled List of Yamaha Keyboards from the 70s. So the fact that it was used on a hit song but was obscure enough not to have its own article immediately meant to me that I had to have one. Except the problem is that they're huge. They're not expensive because, I guess nobody cares about them, but they're so huge that, having one of them shipped to you is, all of a sudden expensive. So I had to wait to find one near me, and that took forever. I set up Craigslist notifications and eBay alerts so that I would get notified anytime one turned up. It took years. But finally, about 1 year ago, I got a Craigslist notification from a guy who was sending one for less than $100. He was like an hour away. So I drove to that guy. It was a total Craigslist encounter. I bought the keyboard. He was like, I looked you up. Your music is actually pretty decent. It was like one of those. Then he sent me his music, and it was about chemtrails. Anyway, I got the keyboard, and I got to tell you, it can't do that much. It's very limited in the sounds it can make. But that's sort of its own fun challenge. Obviously, I've spent some time trying to recreate the exact sound from the beginning of You Make My Dreams. I would say I'm like 80 to 85% of the way there. This is the closest I've gotten. I'm not perfectly happy with that. I still feel like I haven't exactly nailed the sound. But that's also not what I'm really trying to do. I've spent more time trying to come up with my own sounds, and I found one that I absolutely love. There's a certain setting on this that, combined with the Lo-Fi Junkie vibrato from ZVEX pedals, is one of my all-time favorite sounds. Like, of all the different noises I can make with all my synthesizers and the pedals and everything, one of my favorite sounds of all time is this. And it's so good, at least to me, that I feel like I don't have to do much with it. I can just play some like dumb right-hand chords and it'll sound good.